Thank you everyone for coming to this week's session on critical thinking activities. I know like a lot of the people who replied to the session are actually like seasoned Flint users, so hopefully I can share something new here. If not, a lot of them have also agreed to share their experiences, so I'll try and leave a lot of time at the end so that everyone has adequate time to share. But when I was looking at this topic, I was like, what can I show that's actually helpful? And I think it's, oops, sorry, throwing me some errors. Okay. And I think that hopefully today I'll like walk you all through some examples and also some like methods of incorporating more critical thinking into things that you design in Flint. But yeah, that's kind of the agenda there. Recording will be available later for anyone who's on this call and anyone who registered. And questions are welcome at any time. Feel free to like raise your hand, throw them in the chat. Just speak up. Anything works there. Awesome. So for the ice-breaking news, I actually wanted to bring up again like this MIT study from a couple months ago, where essentially they looked at students who are using ChatGPT versus students who weren't using ChatGPT and completing different tasks, and they actually saw a measurable impact on cognitive debt and thinking in the students. So I think like this has been like something that a lot of different news organizations at least have been talking about, like how to make it so that students can use AI and the power of it, but still develop those critical thinking skills, which I think is the whole reason why a lot of us are here today. And then also for like more actual like breaking news. Yeah, I think just yesterday, Microsoft gave a grant to the NEA, which is like one of the largest like education micro-credential organizations in the US, of $325,000 to expand its AI, to expand on supporting educators through training, to help them navigate how to apply AI into education. So yeah, I think everyone's kind of thinking about like, what does this actual application look like? Even Microsoft is investing so much in this like teacher training association to help us figure this out. So yeah, really excited to discuss everything on this topic with you all today. Cool. I'll just go ahead and dive into the activity examples here. But as a TLDR, Sparky can be a great learning partner. It can conduct like Socratic questioning. It can engage in debate. It can act as a writing prep and thought partner. And then it also like can play a role in different simulations. These are some like common use cases that I've seen that have been more towards like the rather than just like question answer. These might enable more critical thinking and more like actually depth of understanding of knowledge for the students. But yeah, what that actually looks like, let me pull this up. So I created this like vocabulary practice activity, right? And you could just like put in a vocabulary list into Flint and have the students like practice, you know, like answering back and forth. But I like try to look at like some of the research on critical thinking strategies and how you could apply those strategies even to something as simple as like, you know, learning the Spanish family vocabulary. So in this session, rather than, you know, the student having to just like answer back and forth, I actually gave Sparky a persona, which I think is like one thing that you can do, of being a Spanish learner who is actually like slightly less skilled than the student. So Sparky's actually asking all these questions like, oh, what's the word for mother? And then like, is there a difference between like, I've like also heard mama is like a thing that people say, and like really applying it into like a full conversation that kind of feels almost like they're talking with someone that they're kind of coaching on this. So yeah, and then I even had it add in like fun facts about its own family every like 3 sentences, or 3 words that it's practicing with the students. So you can also incorporate things like that that make it feel like an actual conversation where the student has to practice and explain. And I think like that's like one of the things that demonstrates like actual understanding of the topics, where like the students can actually explain what it is that that they're learning, kind of like they're on the teaching side instead. Yeah, so that was like, I think a very simple example. I can show you all in the activity settings really quick, like how I set this up. But I went in and picked the option of like quiz students on learning material that I provide. And then I uploaded the list of the words that I want them to cover. And then I said, help students practice these words. Can you act as a person learning Spanish who is meeting the student for the first time and asking about their family? And then, of course, I went kind of back and forth and like tweaked some things, like asking the student to speak in Spanish, but if they speak some English, that's okay. And then I asked it to like specify its persona. So this is kind of a look into my like actual process usually. I know I try and like make it super concise for most Campfire sessions, but this is like how it usually goes. I like go back and forth, I test it a lot, and then I add additional prompting. But yeah, so I think like that's a quick example of taking something that like typically would just be like recall practice, and like making it more like applied to the student and like more that they have to be the one explaining it. Any questions about that one before I move on to the next one? Cool. Okay. So then for this one, kind of in a similar realm of the explanation thing, but more looking at like a lower school example. So kind of how can students, what is the word? Say it in their own words, like the different concepts that they're learning. So this was one on looking at animal adaptations. Let me close this side actually. And kind of wanting the students to explain the reasoning for why animals have adapted to be the way that they are and like demonstrate the understanding that the environment affects the animal and then the animal like survives in the environment because of certain things. So yeah, like this one, I actually just asked it like, I asked it to kind of be in this method of kind of quizzing students on their understanding, but also making sure that asking the kinds of questions that are prompting this sort of more critical thinking from the students. So it's like showing them an animal and then asking like, why do you think it looks like this? Or like, why does it have certain features? And it's like encouraging them to explain more deeply, or like carefully correcting them if they're like not quite on track. So yeah, so like for example, for this polar bear one, I said its fur is white so it can blend in and not be seen. And then it's like pushing me further actually, like why do you think it's important for a polar bear to hide? So I think that's like also a good example of how you can take something that's like kind of simple and like create a whole conversation from it that shows the students' thinking process and their understanding of the topic. And again, in here in the settings, yeah, I gave it a pretty simple prompt actually, and it actually created the detective kind of structure to the activity. I just said have third graders reason with evidence and explain in their own words, which I think are like good specific prompts to put in if you're looking for these sorts of critical thinking activities. Yeah, why different animals have different adaptations based on their environments. And then it was able to create that basically right off the bat for me. And then I just added some things like, grade the student, allow them to speak, not just type, things that are good for lower school. Yeah, and like shorten the messages. But yeah, that one was pretty straightforward. And then I have one more example here. And then I promise at some point I'll show you all like a more structured method of how you can apply this to your specific practice. But yeah, for this one, I also just wanted to show the writing piece. But essentially, here I asked Sparky to have students write a paragraph, and I wanted them to practice like logos, pathos, ethos. And yeah, I was like, okay, can you make students write a paragraph that kind of feels like the first paragraph in a news article, and then have them explain how they incorporated ethos, logos, pathos into their writing and like to make sure that they justify those choices. So then in here in the process, you know, Sparky is playing the role of a writing tutor, so it's not going to do any of the writing for students. And then so it's asking like, you know, paste in your writing, tell me what you're working on. So I pasted in this paragraph about a wildfire, and I said I use pathos to write about a fire. Very straightforward. Yeah, and then so it can like give students specific feedback. It even asks like, you know, what specific words or phrases do you think create an emotional response? And then the students can like highlight these pieces and kind of talk about specific parts of their writing. And then Sparky can actually see the part that they've highlighted. So it's like, I see you've highlighted Maria Santos's quote. And then in this one, it asks like deeper and deeper questions as students kind of explain their thinking. And I do think I've heard of examples where like this can be too much. Like students are saying, there's like never ending questions. I can never satisfy Sparky. So you can also add additional prompting on top of that, saying like, hey, like just ask students like 5 questions, or maybe you can set like a timer on the assignment. But that was like some feedback that I got when I was asking some teachers about how they've been incorporating critical thinking. They said, you know, it does take a toll on the student. So like incorporating breaks into that process is pretty important. But yeah, this one, like they had to like go back and forth, explain their thinking for that. And in the setup here, yeah, I just chose the option for giving students feedback on their writing. And then I said like, you know, I specified the grade level still, but then I think especially here, like have them explain how they incorporated these 3 writing styles, I guess, and then to make sure that they justify their writing choices. And then from here, I also asked it, you know, act as a Socratic questioner, and Sparky kind of understand what that means. So yeah, that kind of helped to gear the question asking. And then at some point, I did have to tell it to like only ask 1 question at a time because it was getting a bit overwhelming. But yeah, those are some like really quick examples of how I applied like critical thinking strategies to activities that might be like a bit more simple. Like I think what we're seeing with AI is that you can take it like the really simple route. You can have it like be like just like giving students a lot of practice, or you can make it super elaborate as well. And I think there's like specific things that you can prompt into each activity to see how it can take it in a more like critical thinking route. So yeah, I understand that was like a really quick overview of some examples. Does anyone have any questions?
I have one, Lulu.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
In the writing, when you set up a writing tutor like you did, do students like, does the pane where you have them paste in, they can highlight and do things like that? Can you actually set the activity up to kind of pop that pane up, or that's something you just got to make sure you teach students that when you go and you're going to put in writing, you've got to create a document and put it in that.
Oh, I see, I see. So
Otherwise, it kind of sometimes will paste into chat, and that's not as a good way to work, obviously.
I see. Yeah. What you could actually do in the prompt is tell Sparky to include a blank document in its initial response. So then it'll like, you know, have that blank one, and then you can like make sure the initial response says, click on the document and like paste your writing in there.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good to point out, especially for the process of students starting to use this. Yeah. Any other questions? I guess just like in summary, we did the quizzing students on material and like having the student explain rather than like just answer. And then the 3rd grade example of also like explaining in your own words, but also having students act as like almost detectives and in that sort of role play scenario. And then the last one was having students write a paragraph, but then making sure that Sparky acts as a Socratic questioner and ask them to justify their choices. Cool. Okay. Sorry for speeding through way too quickly, you guys. But yeah, I do want to make sure to leave time for everyone to share. But yeah, I think this kind of like summarizes what I was talking about earlier, but having the students' roles flipped can be very helpful. And it's like a pretty popular use case of Flint that I've seen where, the student has to do the explaining, and Sparky can like ask the questions. And then also, I think one way to teach digital literacy of AI is you can also ask Sparky to respond incorrectly on purpose. So the students kind of like practice having that critical eye to what AI is giving them and like making sure that they're like fact checking things or like, like correcting Sparky where it's wrong. Because I think like right now AI is still not perfect, and even when you don't prompt it to like do things incorrectly on purpose, there might still be times where it's like not understanding the context properly, or it actually can't give the answer to the student. So it's important to help students develop the sense for when that's happening. And then also I think one example that I didn't show that's like automatically usually incorporates a lot of critical thinking is debating. So you could also have Sparky debate against the student on a specific topic. Gisella's asking if Flint works on Chromebooks. Yes, it does. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I think here is where I can show you all hopefully like some more specific examples of how to actually develop this for your own classroom. Yeah, and I think firstly using chats, I think I've showed this a few times now, but chats are a great way to brainstorm ways to incorporate more critical thinking. So for example, when you're on the homepage, you can ask Flint to help you with like a lot of your own teacher tasks, which is what we highlight here. But you can also ask it to, like create a lesson plan for you or create a worksheet. And then I think, or in the option for like help me with something else, I think even if you just ask Flint like, hey, this is the unit that I'm teaching. This is kind of like the things that I need to cover. If you have like curriculum or standards to upload, that would be great. But then you can use it as a brainstorming partner and say like, how do I like incorporate more critical thinking, or like what are some like activities that I can do that incorporate a lot of critical thinking here. So I think like this brainstorming method of just using the chat is really good. Yes, and yeah, just say that Sparky can use images and create images. I think I can double check this for you. I think it's like a little finicky sometimes when you want it to use your own images, but yeah, I can double check that and let you know what best practices are there. But yeah, so I think the chat's great. But I did for this session make a template activity actually. Let me get that link so you all can try it. Yeah, and Patty's asking, can you limit the number of questions Sparky asks? Yeah, so if you tell it, only ask 5 questions or only ask 3 questions, it's pretty good at sticking with that. I have seen instances where it like gets kind of longer, where Sparky is not that good at counting. So if you say like 25, it might ask like, 23, 26. But I think there's some methods where you can say like, hey, count the questions that you're asking and make sure you only ask 25. That helps a little bit better. But yeah, so in this activity that I made and pasted in the chat there, so it's actually a critical thinking activity designer. So what I did here was, let me see if I can open this. Sorry, I lost my links. Okay. Okay. So in this activity, what I had done was I actually uploaded some resources on critical thinking strategies. So basically, I went in and I said, help me create an activity that helps teachers create their own activities that encourage critical thinking. And then I said, I'll give it some resources so that you can look at strategies that these resources suggest. And so I uploaded these three. And of course, like this is just me showing my process. If you want to make your own activities for yourself that can help in this way, I highly recommend. But yeah, I uploaded this one that was specifically for like elementary school students. And it kind of talked through some strategies for critical thinking. And then I added this one, which was specifically from the Journal of Athletic Training, but I think they had some really good examples as well. Uh, and also like talk through like the various definitions and like what the dispositions of students can look like when they're engaging in critical thinking. So that one was like a bit more scholarly, I guess. And then there was also this one for helping students hone their critical thinking skills. And this one also talked about like strategies to help students do this. So yeah, basically I uploaded those three resources into this Flint activity, but then I also encouraged Flint to do its own research and understanding critical thinking, metacognition, retrieval. Yeah, and then when it popped out the activity, it created this like designing activity to help you all design activities with these strategies. And then I also just wanted to like double check with it that it understood the information that I uploaded. So I asked it to summarize each source, which it did really well. So that's in here also. And yeah, and then I did like a little bit of tweaking so that it made sure to like give responses for Flint activity specifically. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I don't want to interrupt the end of this activity. I was
You
gonna
get
wait till you were done with. Should I wait till you close up this critical thinking activity designer, or just jump in with a question? Sorry to throw you off.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Yeah, I think I'll be done in like 2 minutes. So then I'll come
Fair
back.
enough. Sorry.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, this is like the way that the activity was designed. And then in an application here, I did like a quick demonstration. So like, you know, it's asking for a bunch of information on like what subject area, grade level you're teaching, all that. And then so I gave it, you know, this sort of very basic explanation of what's going on, but I teach science to third grade students. And then I was also like, I was asking it more for like ideas within like the common third grade curricula that would be ideal for critical thinking practice. And then it gave me a bunch of ideas from various life science, physical science, earth science topics. And so this is actually where the animal adaptation example came in from earlier. But yeah, I said like, this one seems interesting. Yeah, and then it's asking me like, what are the learning goals that I have? And basically at the end here, it helps me to create a preview of the activity with like the structure of what it needs to have in Flint. And I think actually this is maybe not the most up-to-date chat that I have with it. But right now, if you go into this activity and give it the sort of context around your class and what you're trying to teach, it should spit out the like settings that you actually just need to copy and paste into Flint, and then it can set something up for you automatically. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, now you made me think of something about this activity, and then I have a question about another activity I'm thinking about. But for this activity, I feel like this isn't a chat. Am I understanding correctly that this is an activity for teachers to use as a thought partner? That's
Yes.
really a cool way to think about it. You could theoretically do this in a chat, but if we're supporting other teachers at our school, we can build this, deploy this, and now other teachers can use this as their thought partner. When I looked up and saw the submit session, that's what made me realize this isn't a chat you're having. It's something you've built for, I guess, all of us if this is in the public library, which I'm hoping it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I think the link that I pasted in the chat is the public library link. Yeah, and if you try it out and you have any feedback from me, I can also update the settings.
Well, right, and we can all tweak it ourselves too because it's public and we make a copy anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
So
I think
I have a follow-up question, but if Bill wants to ask his question on this topic, my question is about a different activity that I think fits this critical thinking world that I want to get your advice on.
yeah, of course. And I think like the highlight here also for using an activity to help other teachers or yourself is that you can give it like those uploads or like that additional content. So like I uploaded like those 3 documents that have like altogether like a list of I think 13 different strategies for critical thinking. So then it's like actually in that headspace of like these are like critical thinking strategies that I can apply, and it kind of like has more of that context that it's focusing on.
But do you mean as the designer of the activity or as the user of the activity? Who's uploading those?
Yeah, as the designer of the activity. So then
Right.
every time you come back to it, it's already like in that, it knows that context and it knows like what you're looking for.
Perfect.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
I want to ask you my idea, but I don't want to cut off Bill if he wants to ask what he was going to ask.
Go ahead, Jeff, you can ask it. Mine's related, but it's actually something technical related to this activity, but it's not about the activity. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was meeting with our social studies department yesterday talking about how they might start implementing Flint. And one of the things that we got down this path about designing an activity around was around research. And I'm sure there's been some Flint activities around this, but one of the things I was imagining is having it be kind of like a thought partner that would guide them in finding resources or ask them questions, like rather than having people go to Google like they might have done even a year ago, how can they within Flint maybe think about the right questions to ask and then either go ask those questions somewhere else or potentially do that research inside of the Flint activity. And I just wondered, any thoughts on a path that might work really well for that? Or is there a Flint Campfire on that I should go look for?
No, you're good. You're good. Actually, I think there might have been a Campfire on research. It's been like almost a year. There's too many topics. But yeah, so I think a couple things to note there. Flint does have access to the internet, so it can like search for new sources for the students to look at. And also it will cite those sources for them. So you can see like where it's coming from, the students can see where it's coming from, and they can like also apply their like digital literacy skills there to see if that's like a credible source that they can like use in their work. And then also I've heard of examples where teachers actually have Flint be like, they're acting like a subject matter expert. So if it is like they're researching a certain topic, the example that I'm thinking of is that I think it was like watersheds. The students were looking at like a local watershed project, and like so they wanted to understand like how different environmental factors affect the quality of the water in their community. And so the teacher set up a Flint activity to be like a watershed expert, uploaded some content there, and then students actually practiced asking questions where, you know, they can each like have their own session, they can ask their own questions. And then eventually they actually brought in like a live expert, like human expert, and the students were able to like ask much better questions because they had already like A, gotten a basic understanding, and like B, like figured out sort of what sorts of questions lead to more interesting information that they can get from the experts. So I think that could also be an interesting route to explore.
I think what one of the things they're been seeing for years that they'd love to try to go beyond is someone just finding an article that's the first thing they find in a Google search, going to that article and copying and pasting something and saying, here's what I'm going to use in my presentation and here's where I'm citing it. And that's the entire transaction between the student and the research. So I think if Flint was able to, or Sparka was able to then interact, like if it got to the point where it was like, here are some articles that might work for you, and then it could even help them engage with the articles that it's now found. I mean, it could be a whole rabbit hole, but now it's not just, I found something, I copied it, or I paraphrased it, and I moved on. I'm going to play with it, so we'll see.
Yeah. I think that's possible. So yeah, let me know if it works out for you, or if there's something that we should improve about Flint to make it work better. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. And then, yeah, Bill, did you still have your question?
Yeah, so on the critical thinking activity designer template that you sent out that's in the public library, one of the things I noticed, I clicked on it and I made a copy because that's the only way you can interact with it. And I can also look at the actual setup. The one thing I noticed, and I don't know if this is going to affect then how it works, is when I went into the actual activity settings, I can't see your chat out, so that doesn't come with the template, but I can go into build manually, and it doesn't look like all the sources that you attached, because you showed 3 sources when you went through it. And it looks like under the guidelines for Sparky section, because where it shows up, it took the text of maybe one of the sources, and that's all that's there. So I'm wondering if we distribute things this way for somebody to edit, if they're going to end up losing the content. I mean, if we just had them use it, it would be fine, obviously, but
Yeah, this is interesting. I can actually, I'll go in and edit the settings here and I'll upload them. Yeah, the instructions or like when I was testing it out, it seemed to have worked, but
I think if we use your activity, it'd be fine, but it's once for us to, like, we're not using, I mean, this particular example, you gave us a link to a template. So for example, if I were to create something for a teacher and say, oh, and if you want to modify it, you could go ahead and, just make a copy. They wouldn't, it seems like they might not have all the content, which is a good point you bring up. Like if we're going to curate resources for teachers to help them, save some work in creating something like this, a brainstorming tool, I'd want to make sure those resources kind of come along for the ride if they make their own copy. Otherwise, I can just use the one I make, but then they can't modify it.
Makes sense. Yeah, actually, that is a really good call out. Thank you for checking that. And I'll actually show you how I'm adding it, so everyone in the chat can also see this. But yeah, I went into the build manually guidelines. I just added this one, but then you can also, oh, I see, interesting. It won't actually let me upload. Oh wait, JK. So you can scroll down here and then I'll like add the link for the next one. And then let me copy this third one. Scroll all the way down and add the final link here. And then now it should all be there and I'll update it. So you all just need to like duplicate it if you have already. But yeah, thank you for finding that.
Well, it seems like it might be an issue with templates because you had helped a while back. I'd asked a question, I don't know, months ago, last year, or something like that, about moving stuff between workspaces. And you had a nice trick, which was, tell it to like package this all up, and then I could copy that and put it into a chat, but it didn't take the attachments. However, the attachments were all there in the activity that I originally had, and I could download them. And so when it's come across in a template in this example, it looks like they weren't necessarily there.
Yeah, actually, maybe. Yeah, let me try updating this and then see if we can see it in the settings again afterwards. Because I think maybe it's just having trouble like attaching multiple sources to the guidelines. Okay, I think it's there now that I've done it manually. But yeah, let me bring this to the engineers again and see if they can figure out how to make it better.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Cool. And then Giselle is asking, is it possible to create an activity in Flint and only share the link to students to work without them having to create an account? I do think they need an email, a school email, to be able to use Flint. So yeah, but I think, or they can log in with their Google account also. So if they already have like a Google Classroom account, then they should be able to just log in with their Google account and use Flint. So they don't have to create like a separate username and password. But yeah, okay. So yeah, that's like one critical thinking activity designer that I made. If you look in the public library, there's some other examples of like activity designers that schools have made like based on their AI policies or based on like, like inquiry-based learning. So I think there's a lot of variations on this that can be created. Yeah, and like really is just helping to encourage teachers to branch out a bit further and like do a bit more with the activities that they're designing. Yes, any questions about that before we move on to the share out? Oh, awesome. Krista said that the sources came through in the duplicate, so that's great. Okay, sorry if this session has been a bit more chaotic. Yeah, I know I asked Jeff to share some of his thoughts, and I know you might have to head off early, so wanted to make sure that you have time first to share.
Did you want me to show anything from the link I shared or share my screen or just talk about what the activity was? I'm happy to just explain it. It's similar to one of the examples you showed actually.
Yeah. Whatever you're most comfortable with.
Well, I mean, I have it open. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, yeah, and I can paste it in the chat while you're doing that.
Okay. Let's see if this works for me. Can people see my Flint. All right, so I'm going to be actually deploying this activity in about 45 minutes, and I have a 20-minute drive to work, so I'll be leaving soon. This is an activity I designed for our 9th grade students in a human development class where we're kind of introducing AI, and I'm really trying to get at the idea that they don't need to use AI to replace their ability to write and have voice and have their own ideas. So I'm kind of doing this in a multi-phase approach. The way this works, and I haven't actually practiced sharing all the settings. I guess if I click into this, maybe that's going to be more interesting for people to see than the idea of this is, I don't know, maybe we should go to build manually for now. Students are going to basically be given an option. Sorry that the demo is, maybe I should even run this on the side or something. The idea here is that they're going to be offered these 6 different possible internships to run, to apply to, and it's going to ask them questions once they select one of the 6 AI generated possible generic internships, questions about why they selected it, what about it appeals to them, basically what you might have if you had a writing mentor sitting with you. So it's asking them questions just like, why do you care? What can you say about this? What stories have you had? I've tweaked this activity probably 5 times now. This was my first time to ever have the Sparky text editor be the way that they're going to interact rather than in chat, just like Bill said, like writing something over and over again or copying what you've written already into chat is silly. I had originally imagined using this with Google Docs, but what I'm realizing now, and maybe other people already knew this, is that when you bring in a Google Doc or vice versa, when you export to a Google Doc, it's really a snapshot of whatever you've done. The only way I found, and I think this is real, to get Sparky to interact with writing as it's kind of live is to do it in this text editor. So if you either give Sparky the instructions to open the text editor early, which I didn't know that you could just say open a white document, I wanted them to engage in the questions first. So I kind of like the way mine works where they're talking with Sparky back and forth, and at a certain point Sparky will say, sounds like you're ready to start getting some ideas on the page. How about we start with your first paragraph? And then that's when the document opens. I got to keep working on this because sometimes Sparky will kind of pre-populate that document with like a summary of what we've already discussed, which wasn't my intention. So I've done this over multiple times. I eventually was like, you know what? I'm just going to, rather than writing to Sparky, open the document myself and start writing and say, hey, I updated the doc. What do you think? I love seeing how you highlighted a section and how Sparky knows what's highlighted. That's really cool. And I know I'm going quick, but the other biggest takeaway for me is I've now probably built 5 or 6 activities. I've only deployed 1 to a whole class of students, and this will be my second time to do it with 2 more classes. But I think adding time limits to the activities is a problem unless you're doing a quiz. Almost every time I've done this, I or the students run out of time, and there's no going back once that happens. So unless you really need it to happen in this very strict time, why wouldn't I want a student to engage with this writing activity over like days? So I've turned that off, and I actually did go back and test my writing. I drafted an entire letter over the course of an entire weekend, and it was really good at jumping back in whenever I wanted. My one caveat is hitting refresh when you're getting back in to make sure it wakes up again and you don't lose something is really important. And again, Lulu, I don't want to go too long, but the other really cool thing about the text editor is it will let you jump back in time to multiple iterations of instances where you said, hey, I've got an update. Like it has the little forward back button that I found to be really cool to be able to go back and see it. So again, I'm trying to get a lot of teachers the ability to say, hey, look, we can have students write with AI and not say AI is just doing it for them. It's kind of allowing teachers to have an instance of themselves. And I will now stop talking. So, or unless people want to ask something about that.
Oh yeah, thank you, Jeff. That was amazing. Yeah, any questions for Jeff? Oh yeah, Chris, the link that I pasted there, I'll paste it again, is the template that Jeff created in the library. Yeah, and I'm just gonna steal the screen share from you really quickly, just so we can, just so I can show them what did. One sec. Okay.
I hadn't really thought through what it would be like to demo Sparky live as opposed to talk about it. So
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, this is what Jeff was talking about in terms of like the versions in Flint. I do think what you were saying about how like probably the most interactive way that students can work with writing with Flint is through the document feature. But yeah, in here you can like scroll through the different versions that students hand to Flint. Unfortunately, there's just 2 right here, but then like over time they can see like what sorts of edits that they've made and what sorts of things they've added or what sorts of questions they've had about it. Yeah. Thank you. I'm excited to hear how it goes in 45 minutes.
The other thing that's cool about it is, like, say they get to the point where it's a draft is done and you're having someone submit it, they can click the little export to Google Drive thing and like make a static version that maybe that's how they submit it to the teacher, even though they could see it in Flint. And then later, if there was another round of editing, you know, they can bring a new import back in and work from there. Obviously they can copy and paste it, but like, I just didn't like the workflow of a lot of back and forth between Google Drive and Sparky, because really it works really well just in Flint.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, I'm going to drive to work and try this.
Yeah.
I'll report back.
Thank you.
Bye.
Safe drive. Yeah, and then someone else I had singled out to share some of his experiences, David from Kincaid. If you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. I teach 7th grade U.S. history. We actually break it up into 2 years, 7th and 8th grade in our middle school. And we've been writing a big topic of conversation already today, so I'm not going to share anything there because we've created a lot of similar activities within the department to support students writing, especially when it comes to just structure. We've found a lot of success with just kind of coming up with a logical argument to support like thesis statement creation, things like that. And so I'll just call out like one little activity that we deployed at the end of last year when we were having students compare the Constitution and the Articles of Confederation. So we were kind of adding, you know, a little bit of content in there, but we structured it as like actually a historical skills tool, but also an AI training tool where they were crafting better prompts. So it kind of walks them through not only like the idea of how to build better questions and, you know, kind of approach a document with like, okay, what am I trying to get out of this? And what questions am I actually asking? But working with Flint too, to then help prompt Flint better by the end. So that way, when they're using it for, you know, as a study partner, because at least I'm finding with my students, they like to create their own activities. And I'll share a couple of those that I thought were really good in a second. Yeah, it was a really useful 10 minutes spent, really short, just warm-up activity. But I did notice that even in the conversations in the days afterwards, that the students were thinking about how they phrased their questions. They didn't quite know necessarily like that they were doing it, but I definitely saw a little depth of change and a lot more asking and reflecting to me of like, okay, well, I'm trying to say this, but you know, how do I get there? So we really liked that activity. And then I'm actually about to next week deploy a new activity that I just ran through myself, and it's a guided self-assessment on their writing. So we're 3 weeks into school. We just had our first little writing activity, just a short kind of paragraph, and I've graded them and given them back to the students. And we're really working on reflection this year, not only just in their writing skills, but reflecting on the process of writing. So that way, if they do decide to just go into Flint or ChatGPT and get it to write it for them, at least they could maybe say how they got there. Just as I've run through the simulation of it, and I kind of talked to it like a 7th grader, you know, a little lazy, not wanting to go through a process of actually thinking about my work. I'm pretty impressed with what it did, and you know, I'd be happy to share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah.
Let me open that right now. Sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, there it is.
No, you're good.
Okay. All right. So basically the activity is just, it's going to guide you through. So I uploaded a sample paragraph and the rubric and just, you know, here you go. So it quickly went through, figured out what I was trying to do, what it was grading on, compared it to the class rubric, and then gave me these 3, you know, reflective questions. So I kind of went through those, just addressed them like that. And immediately I was loving what it was doing. You know, it's kind of cheering me on. It's telling me, you know, good self-awareness here and there. Obviously I knew what the answer was, so I'm not exactly like a seventh grader simulating it. But I was really liking the feedback just because it was working. It was chunking it all nicely, breaking it down really nice in the output. We continued the conversation. It goes on, and we evaluate the entire paragraph. Continues to give me feedback, but I'll skip to the end here because this is what I really liked. Here it is. It produced a self-assessment report, and let me see if I can make this bigger. Yeah. So clearly I need to work on my paragraph here. A lot of areas of improvement, but I'm thinking like, why not do this earlier in the writing process? Let the students sort of see where they're at and, look at these connections, look what they need to make. I was able to show that I knew what needed to go in there. I just didn't put it in there in my initial draft. So, and then it really prioritizes, what my challenges are, what my insight was, comes up with an action plan step. And then I didn't go all the way into this, but then finally some further reflective questions. But then I love the next steps that it gave me. So now I'm sitting here thinking, okay, the kids have a chance, if this is earlier in the writing process, to really make some changes and hopefully understand just, the why we're doing all this writing. Sure. Go ahead, Bill.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for sharing this. This is great. How did you get it to produce a self-assessment report at the end? Like, are students supposed to say, I'm done? Or, how did you sort of set that up?
Because I followed all of its prompts, so I gave it all of my own ratings, and you can see here it will calculate the tile store. And I don't remember if I specified that explicitly in the, let me go back. Where'd it go?
That's great. I could even see that self-assessment report as something maybe, they export to a Google Doc or something later, and they keep that as kind of a portfolio with their writing as they're progressing in the year to reflect back on their improvement.
Absolutely. And I think that was the goal. So let me look at the activity settings here and just see if that was something I put in. So here's, I can have, and I'll put this one in the library because, here we go. So I asked it to review their report, save their insights and all that. So yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So those are a couple of just some of the activities we're doing, and I'll share those with y'all. And we've had great success so far, and thanks everyone else for sharing.
Yeah, thanks, David. If you send those to me, I can send it as a part of the post-event email with the recording and everything. So that'd be great.
Oh, awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. And then I think the final person that I had asked beforehand, at least, but of course, if anyone has examples that they want to share as well, you're welcome to, was Krista, who is also from Kincaid. But yeah, feel free to take it away, Krista.
Hello, thank you, David, and to Jeff too for their awesome ideas. The thing, I don't know that I have much more to offer, but what I will say is the cognitive load that critical thinking requires of students, as we know, is very high, and the nature of generative AI is to keep pushing and keep going and keep going. It will just go on and on. So my big thing that I recognize is I actually have to code into the activities, remind the students that this is heavy lifting, remind them to take breaks, talk about the process of critical thinking in addition to prompting them to think critically, so that they're learning, so that they are learning the critical thinking skills, but they're also learning about what critical thinking requires of them. And they know, you can't do this all in one fell swoop. You have to take breaks, hydrate, just stuff that's so, it's the invisible stuff that I'm trying to make visible for my students, the metacognitive understanding of what's required. I'm trying to have Sparky remind them of those things. That's really all I think I have to offer that's different maybe than what's been shared so far.
That's awesome, Krista. I think that's especially important to call out. I've heard definitely examples where it's like, I think the teacher has created this activity. They think it's wonderful. They think it's going to like improve a lot of like visibility into student thinking and everything. But then the students, I mean, it's also about the student experience, you know, like how are they going through it? Like, is it like too much all at once? Like, should we ease into it? I think that's very important to look at, especially since like it's clearly been proven that like the default interaction, not just for students, but like for adults as well, the default interaction with AI is just to get it to like, you know, do a lot for you and for you to consume. So especially when you're trying to kind of flip the narrative or like change the process, I do think it's something that like requires easing into. So I think that's really good to highlight. Yeah. And then Bill said, at Krista, have you had the Flint activity do some of the coaching on the critical thinking process? Or do you handle that personally?
Well, both. You know, I try to coach them personally, talking to them about the process. But that's what I'm trying to communicate, is that I have had the Flint activity do that coaching. When I am creating the activity, that's one of the things that Flint has to do, is to remind them of what the process takes from them, what it requires of them, and what it's taking, so that they understand the expenditure of energy. And I want to get them that information as much as I can to try to foil the default interaction, which is just like, just give me the answer. Like, just, here's my thought. But, that thing that we know happens, Flint gives them 25 lines and they give 2 words. And then Flint gives them 24 more lines and they give, maybe a compound sentence if I'm lucky. So I'm trying to, teach them about the thinking while I'm also asking them to do the thinking within Flint. And is it perfect? This is new for me, because I realized, like, okay, when I was testing it, I was like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I can show you, if you want, what I tried to do. Would that be useful, or does anyone else have stuff they want to share? I don't want to take up time.
I think that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can do this. Sometimes I can't do it very well. Okay.
I believe in you. Yay.
Okay. All right. So here. What are you looking at right now? What do you see on my screen?
We see your English Lit group.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I see your cursor moving around. So.
Okay, good. Okay. This is close reading. So this is for a senior on-level English class. And let's see. Of course, it's not going to show you. Let me see if I can simulate.
Yeah, I think this was the example that you mentioned in your registration that kind of caught my eye. But I guess just for some background, Krista had the students analyze Hosier songs. Yeah, and like kind of looking at it from like an English Lit perspective, which I thought was really interesting. And I think you mentioned in your registration how like.
Okay, here, yes, just pause for a second. Yeah. Do you see as it's scrolling up, this is getting complex. Perfect time for a break if you need one. Did you see that? It scrolled fast and I'm like, I've lost control of the machine, but this is sophisticated thinking. Take a break if you're feeling mentally tired. These connections will keep developing. Where would I find how I keyed them cognitively less broken into small, they focus on one. I can't find where I keyed it in. Maybe it's in here.
Yeah, maybe somewhere in that chat.
Yeah, no. So, you know, I tell them like, this is, you know, of course, not unusual for on-level classes. Several of them have been medically diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm trying to give them also, obviously, like we do, as much information about these students particularly, so that it is sensitive to it. So shorter and scannable. I don't feel like it did that. But there were some moments where wherever I coded it in, that where it brought to mind this idea of what you're doing is complex. Consider taking a break. And that would be where I would come in as an individual and just say, like, look, I am designing these. So if it suggests a break, take one. What I really like about what I've heard so far is this idea of a document opening up that they could come back to and work with over time. I think that would be a perfect addition to this assignment.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm just gonna steal the screen share from you really quickly.
Yes. There we go.
But yeah, I think one of the new things in Flint, in case you all haven't seen it yet, that I think might also help with your goal of trying to like help students in real time is this needs attention feature. So I think like even if you haven't quite gotten to the part of like, you know, students are like thinking metacognitively, I think at least like encouraging them to voice to the AI like when they need help or when they're overwhelmed or anything like that, just like talking about their feelings, then Flint will actually flag that in the activity dashboard for you. So like as you're walking around, you can like check back on your laptop, see if there's anything that has popped up as needs attention, that's like updates live. That could also be a way to like be able to be there for the student in real time in person. But yeah, I think this is like very good conversation to have, very good to like think about as you create these like super exciting critical thinking activities. So yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to share or have questions about? Yeah, go ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, I'm actually a sophomore in high school who's also really interested in Flint. And I do have a question for some of the teachers here. Even though this is a Flint Campfire session, sometimes I feel like that prompting yourself and being able to sort of prompt yourself to say, hey, maybe I didn't do this part of the essay so well. And let's see, like reflect on yourself and think critically about what you read without having someone else or some AI go into your space and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Is an important skill. Basically, self-generate your own critical thinking as you do your tasks. So do the teachers here think that having Flint generate these questions is a good choice all the time, or maybe only some of the time, and then other times students would do it themselves?
May I respond to Isaac?
Yeah.
Isaac, thank you, first of all, for being here and for raising this question. Kudos to you. I think you're onto something, because what I'm noticing is that students do want to actually talk to the AI, just not so much in my activities. And yesterday when I was looking through activities, like to see what the students had said, and the most interesting one was when a student hijacked the activity to begin talking about how the boy that her friend liked did not like her back, and what should she do to help her friend. And I was like energized in a way that I was so not energized reading their other answers, you know, to my activity. But what was so interesting was that within that, because it was in an activity, the activity kept trying to link it to the text, which was actually super interesting, because what it could communicate to the student, and I would need to talk about this with them, is that, in fact, I teach English. Texts that we study are meant to help us answer questions like, what should I do with my friend who's the boy doesn't like her? And it kept saying, well, like the girl in the story. And I thought, oh my God, this is genius. Like, how can I leverage exactly what you're saying, Isaac? What do they want to talk about within the activity? Because that really is where the critical thinking will take fire, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an awesome example, Krista. And I think also, Isaac, to your question, I think, there's like a bit of coaching. I think this is like what we're trying to get at. Like, how do we coach students to like think about cognitive thinking? How do they think about their thinking, And then eventually, like, the goal is, I think, for the students to pursue that on their own and like to figure out like, okay, these are the sorts of questions I need to be asking. This is like the sort of focus that I need to have when I'm having conversations with AI. So yeah, I think right now we're still trying to, I think even adults are trying to figure out like how do we actually interact with AI in a way that's positive and like helps me learn and helps me grow. So how do we like then also show that to students is just like a huge question. But I think, yeah, thank you for your question. It's triggered a lot of good thinking and responses. Yeah. Yeah, and Chris was saying how like, they would need to share the chats so that they can see, so that the teachers can see all of that kind of thinking from the students. But, when they're in activities, you can see all of their process and ideas. Yeah, but that might be something interesting that we can explore from a product side of things as well. Like, are there sorts of chats that we can highlight to teachers? I think that's something that we've been like trying to look at, but it does get kind of complex with like privacy and all that. But yeah, if anyone here has thoughts on that they'd like to share with me, please reach out, let me know. I do know we're like a couple minutes over time, so I will just go ahead and wrap up. But I do have time to stay on if anyone wants to. But yeah, so here's like the list of upcoming sessions that I'm planning. Still kind of subject to change, but this is like hopefully what's going to go down. If anyone here wants to share at any of these sessions, please let me know. Or if there's like any specific questions that you want some of these sessions to address, also please let me know. But yeah, just trying to be transparent about what's going on behind the scenes here. Yeah, and this will be in the slides that I share out after this meeting as well. But yeah, all recordings will be posted on our website. You'll get a direct link to it once it's available. And here are the QR codes. So if you're here, you're probably already subscribed to the Campfire calendar, but there it is again if you need it. We do have an Instagram that we've started recently. A lot of our social media kind of tends more towards like administrators or school leadership, but our Instagram we're trying to target like specifically towards teachers and practice. So that might be something cool to follow. And then finally, our Flint community is kind of our space for you all, by you all is the goal. So yeah, feel free to join there. It's kind of like a mix of a forum and a Q&A area and tech support. So if you have any questions or even if there's anything that you want to share to the group and like get their feedback and thoughts on, that is a great place to go to. Yeah, awesome. Thank you all for joining me today. I'll leave this up on the screen for a little bit, but yeah, let me know if you have any final questions and whatnot. I can hang out for a couple minutes. But yeah, bye. Thanks, David. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Emily.